who believed Hitler was the greatest man in the world. Cole told friends he wanted to go to Germany, volunteer for special training in sabotage, and then return to the United States to blow up ships and aircraft factories. Shortly after the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor, Cole enlisted as a sailor in the United States Navy, but deserted from the USS Florida when it docked at Para, Brazil. Cole made his way back to America and visited a friend, Dick Siebert, in Belmore, Long Island. Cole told Siebert he was going to manufacture a nitroglycerin bomb and get close to Roosevelt and blow him to hell, and I'll go along with him. Siebert unsuccessfully tried to persuade Cole to abandon his plans, calling the idea preposterous. According to Siebert, Cole was determined to carry out his assassination plan. When Cole left Siebert's house, he traveled to New York City and registered at a hotel, carrying a case of nitroglycerin. Siebert and his mother immediately contacted the police. Siebert said Cole had nearly enough nitroglycerin to blow up a battleship. He's a clever mechanic and knows exactly how to make a bomb. He hates Roosevelt and our form of government. He's desperate and really intends to carry out the threat, said Siebert. The Secret Service began a manhunt for Cole. A background investigation revealed that Cole had abandoned his wife, deserted from the U.S. Army, before deserting for the Navy, been arrested for an armed robbery in Tulsa, escaped from a mental asylum in Oklahoma, and had been indicted for stabbing a shipmate, but had managed to escape police custody. Secret Service agents discovered Cole had taken a room at a New York hotel. The service occupied a room directly opposite and arrested him on his return in the early hours of the next morning. Cole was armed with a 16-inch long butcher's knife. In his room, they found bomb-making materials. At another hotel, where Cole had rented a room, they found a black suitcase containing 2 bottles of nitroglycerin and a bottle of nitric acid. Cole was taken to the New York City Police Headquarters. He first denied it, but then admitted that his purpose was to kill that son of a bitch Roosevelt. I wanted to destroy him in order that we can get a new commander-in-chief who will make peace with Germany and then go after the Japanese. I hate President Roosevelt. He was responsible for our entry into the war and the killing of a great many sailors in the North Atlantic. Cole's signed confession stated that he planned to strap 3 nitroglycerin bombs to his waist. He would wear an army uniform to get close to Roosevelt's car as the president exited the White House, and then, he said, blow myself and the president to bits and also kill any Secret Service agents or other people who were nearby. After Cole was sent to a psychiatric hospital, he continued to threaten to kill Roosevelt and told staff he would have no difficulty escaping from the institution. The Secret Service responded by insisting Cole be sent to a more secure hospital, the Mateawan State Hospital for the Criminally Insane in Beacon, New York. Arguably the most serious threat to President Roosevelt's life occurred shortly before the president set sail for the Tehran-Cairo War Conference. In early November 1943, an armed stalker waited for FDR for 10 days in Lafayette Park, across the street from the White House. The would-be assassin was Walter Harold Best, 38-year-old native of Nelson, Wisconsin. After arriving in Michigan in 1938, Best married and became the father of 2 small children. He was variously employed as a farmhand, a magazine salesman, and at a restaurant. Although he did not serve in the army during the Second World War, he had a brother who served in Italy. On November 2, 1943, Best left his home in Pontiac, Michigan, armed with a loaded .38 caliber revolver and 10 additional rounds of ammunition. He arrived in Washington, D.C. on November 3rd and registered at the Congress Hotel. He wrote a letter to his wife, telling her that he intended to get rid of Roosevelt. He had learned that the president was out of town, but he intended to await his return. Best's statement that the president at the time was out of town was correct. The president had left the White House and traveled by train to Hyde Park on October 29th and did not return to Washington until November 4th. Best spent the period of November 3rd to November 13th observing the comings and goings of White House staff. He walked around Lafayette Park across the street from the executive mansion, hoping to get a pot shot at the president when FDR left the White House to attend a church or carry out one of his official duties. He was also aware that Roosevelt was often driven in an open limousine and sometimes drove himself in a convertible. The fabric tops of convertibles were reinforced to repel grenades, but FDR often drove with the tops down. There were certainly many opportunities during this period for Best to carry out his attack. On November 6th, 2 days after his return from Hyde Park, the president drove to Camp David and returned to the White House the following day. On November 10th, he was motored to the National Airport from the White House to meet his returning Secretary of State, Cordell Hull, and returned to the White House at 4 p.m. At 10:40 a.m. on November 11th, his Secret Service protectors drove him to Arlington National Cemetery for a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, returning at 11 a.m. At 9:30 p.m. that same day, FDR left the White House to travel by motorcar to Quantico, where he boarded the USS Potomac for the first leg of his sea journey to the Tehran-Cairo Conference. The dangers of Roosevelt traveling in an open-top convertible weren't lost on Kenneth B. Seckel, who was a captain of the White House police force. Seckel recalled driving one day from Hyde Park, FDR's mother's apartment in New York, that, "My God, we had about 20% of the police force of New York City involved in the president's protection, and I got out of his car, and there were 1,000 people all over the neighborhood. I said to one of the Secret Service men, if anyone wanted to take a pot shot, there wasn't much that could be done." In Best's letter to his wife, he told her that he had infiltrated a group of soldiers who were unloading a truck at a White House gate. He said the soldiers were busy, which made it possible for him to gain access to the White House. However, as he deliberated whether or not to steal a soldier's rifle lying on the ground nearby, he was discovered and he quickly walked away. Best's account was partially confirmed in 1966 when former Secret Service Director Franklin Wilson said an unnamed would-be assassin had stolen a rifle from White House Army sentries, and the next day it was found in a flower box at the back of the State Department building. The soldiers were severely disciplined for their serious lapse of duty. Best's wife contacted the police, who relayed her information to the Secret Service on November 13th. That same day, Best was ticketed for jaywalking, was abusive to the police officer, and was arrested. At the police station, he was identified as wanted by the Secret Service. Best was not armed when he was arrested, but Secret Service agents soon discovered the pistol and bullets in his hotel room. During his interrogation, Best admitted he had been stalking President Roosevelt. "I had electrodes running through my brain," he told agents, "and they told me to get rid of Roosevelt." On November 23, 1943, 10 days after his arrest, Best was judged insane and sent to Gallinger Hospital in Washington before being sent to a Michigan psychiatric hospital. Hey everyone, Scott here. One more brief word from our sponsors. Well, troubles for FDR weren't over, and really they wouldn't be throughout the rest of his presidency. On November 14th, one day after Best was arrested, FDR was nearly killed when he was aboard the USS Iowa, bound for the Tehran-Cairo Conference. Around 8 a.m., during an air defense drill, there was a shattered explosion close by the battleship. The Iowa's captain saw the wake of a torpedo and promptly heeled his ship to port, making a 90-degree turn. The torpedo missed the ship by only 20 feet. Fearing that German submarines were attacking, the president's security detail prepared to take the president off the ship in a lifeboat if necessary. But a few minutes later, an escort ship reported that a live torpedo had been fired by accident. Were it not for the alert captain's maneuver, the torpedo would have struck the Iowa directly below FDR's quarters. According to Soviet agents, Waffen SS commander Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's favorite cloak and dagger operative, also had Roosevelt in his sights. Skorzeny allegedly had been given the mission of assassinating FDR, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin when the Big Three met for a conference in Tehran in November 1943. Tehran had been chosen by Stalin because it was close to the Soviet Union and the Red Army bases of northern Iran. But Tehran had also been rife with German agents eager to tap into anti-British sentiment. Stalin informed Roosevelt of the plot, codenamed Operation Long Jump, and persuaded FDR to stay at the Russian embassy where he said it was safer. In Tehran, U.S. General Herbert Norman Schwarzkopf and his British counterpart, Colonel Joseph Spencer, put their subordinates on alert for Skorzeny assassins. All but 6 of the 38 German commandos who had parachuted into Tehran were quickly rounded up. The remainder were captured 3 months later. All were executed by the Russians. Roosevelt said the plot, if successful, would have been a pretty good haul, and Churchill was excited, even pleased, when he heard his life had been threatened. He looked into everyone's face with the happiest sort of suspicions. Well, not everyone believed the plot was real. America's ambassador to the Soviet Union, Averell Harriman, suspected the Russians had cooked it up. Additionally, the British Joint Intelligence Committee of the War Cabinet concluded the so-called Nazi plot against the Big Three was complete baloney. Initially, Skorzeny himself denied the existence of any such plot, and many Western historians have always been skeptical. But Skorzeny eventually admitted the plot in 1966, and Russian sources continue to insist that the plot really existed. In 2007, one of the KGB operatives involved in the attempt to stop the alleged assassination plot stated flatly, "The success of our group in locating the Nazi advance party and our subsequent actions thwarted an attempt to assassinate the Big Three." Well, Roosevelt didn't die from the bullet of an assassin, but from all the stress he had undertaken as a war president. In April 1945, FDR went south to his Warm Spring house in Georgia, what he called the Little White House, to try to recover his strength. He was accompanied by his friend Elizabeth Shamadoff, an artist who was to paint his portrait. On the morning of April 12th, FDR complained to his doctor of a slight headache and stiffness in his neck. As he posed for his picture and spoke to his mistress, Lucy Rutherford, he went through his wallet and tossed his draft card in the wastebasket. He had carried it with him throughout the war. "I have a terrific headache," he said, and then slumped forward. Roosevelt died 2 hours later in his small bedroom. All right, well, that's all for this episode. In the next episode, we're going to be looking at a president, codenamed Lancer, who is John F. Kennedy, and see what sort of assassination attempts were happening against him. What sort of domestic assassins rose up? Was the Soviet Union trying to assassinate him? Why was he successfully assassinated when so many other presidents weren't? And as you can see, there have been many near misses that have happened. We'll see you and discuss all that in the next episode. All right, well, that was the episode for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. First of all, I'd like to thank the Knowlton's Rangers, and especially our spy masters, Baron Fraser, Carl from Norway, Chris Romaine, Moondoggy from Ohio, and Rick Knowlton, and I'll explain what that means in a second. If you want to support the show and help me keep producing this content, there are 4 easy ways for you to do it. 1, subscribe to the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you want to do that, you can go to historyunplugpodcast.com and there you'll find instructions. 2, join our Facebook group, which you can find if you just search for History Unplugged. And please like and share posts that I put up about new episodes. 3, submit a question to me so that I can answer it on air. You can email me at info@historyonthenet.com or leave a voicemail. And again, go to historyunpluggedpodcast.com and you'll find instructions. Lastly, and I think this one is the best, is to become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. The Knowlton's Rangers were an elite reconnaissance and espionage detachment of the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War, but it's also the name of the History Unplugged membership program. Learn how to join by going to patreon.com/unplugged. So here's what you get if you become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. If you join at the level of Scout, you can get early access to new podcast episodes, along with enjoying absolutely every single episode of the History Unplugged podcast ad-free. All 270 and counting episodes. If you join at the level of Intelligence Officer, you can also get access to premium episodes, like a multi-part series on the life of Audie Murphy, the most decorated combat soldier in World War II, or the 10-part series Ottoman Lives, a series that looks at the cast of characters that made up the Ottoman Empire, such as the Sultan, the Eunuch, the Harem Servant Girl, and the Soldier. And finally, if you join at the level of Spy Master, you get all the same stuff as the Scouts and Intelligence Officers, but you also get a shout-out to you and or your business at the end of each episode, a 3-pack of hardcover history books, plus you will be put at the very front of the line for me to answer your question about history, and I can guarantee I will dedicate an episode that's about an hour long or so to your question. Sign up